At -96 degrees Fahrenheit, the storm had already decided the ending, and Emma Carter was just a small shape half buried in white, her breath slowing, her fingers no longer hers, when something stepped out of the blizzard, not like a savior but like the final sentence of a story that should have ended there. A tiger, silent, enormous, its eyes cutting through the snow as if it had come to claim what the cold had started. And for a moment nothing moved, because even the wind seemed to wait for the inevitable. But it didn't happen. The tiger didn't strike. It stood there watching her fragile body tremble against the ice, and something in that stare broke the rule nature had written long before either of them existed. Then slowly, impossibly, it lowered itself beside her, blocking the wind, its body a wall against death itself, and warmth, real warmth, began to exist where it never should have. Emma didn't understand. She couldn't. But she leaned into it because survival doesn't ask questions, it just holds on. And when the storm grew worse, the tiger stood again and began to move, forcing her to follow, step by step, through a world that wanted them both gone, until the ground cracked, until shadows moved in the distance, until the tiger turned not away from danger but toward it, as if protecting her meant choosing something greater than instinct. And somewhere far ahead a light flickered through the storm, too late, maybe, because when Emma collapsed again, the tiger didn't follow. It stayed behind in the white, and no one could explain why. When she was found, she kept whispering about the monster that chose not to be one, or why the snow behind her showed only one set of tracks going back into the storm. They said no one survives -96 degrees Fahrenheit alone, but by the time anyone realized Emma Carter was missing, the storm had already erased the world she knew and replaced it with something colder than fear, something quieter than death, a white horizon that never ended, and a silence so deep it felt like the earth itself had stopped breathing. And somewhere inside that silence a small girl kept walking, even though her legs had forgotten how. Even though each step felt like it belonged to someone else, someone stronger, someone who wasn't about to disappear. But Emma was not that person anymore. She was slowing, fading, becoming part of the storm that surrounded her, her gloves stiff with ice, her breath shallow and uneven, each exhale thinner than the last, as if the air itself no longer wanted her there, and the wind, relentless and unseen, pressed against her like an invisible wall, pushing her back, turning her around, confusing every direction until forward and backward meant nothing at all, and still she moved because stopping meant something worse, something final, something she could feel waiting just behind her thoughts, a quiet surrender that crept in every time she closed her eyes for too long. And that was the moment it almost took her, when her knees finally gave in and she sank into the snow, not falling but folding, as if the world had gently asked her to rest and she no longer had the strength to say no. The cold rising fast now, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket, not sharp, not painful, just soft and endless, and for the first time since she had been lost, the storm didn't feel like an enemy, it felt like an ending, peaceful in a way that scared nothing because fear required energy she no longer had. And that was when something else entered the story, not with sound, not with warning, but with presence. A shift in the air so subtle it might have been imagined if not for the feeling that she was no longer alone, and far beyond her dimming vision, through layers of falling snow and fading light, a shape moved, large and deliberate, cutting through the storm like it belonged there, like the cold itself answered to it, and though Emma could not fully see it, could not understand what was approaching, something deep inside her recognized it as the final piece, the last thing she would ever face, because nothing that lived out here came gently, nothing came without purpose, and yet this presence did not rush, did not strike, it slowed as it drew closer, its movement careful, measured, almost uncertain, as if the rules that governed everything in this frozen world had suddenly become unclear, and Emma, drifting somewhere between waking and gone, felt it before she saw it, a weight in the air, a quiet that pressed differently than the storm, and in that fragile moment, where time stretched and meaning dissolved, the question formed without words, not why am I here, not how do I survive, but something far stranger, something that would not make sense even if she lived to tell it. Why hasn't it ended yet? And the storm did not answer, and the cold did not answer, and whatever stood just beyond her closing eyes remained there, waiting, as if deciding something that should never need deciding, as if the line between hunter and protector had not yet been drawn, at least not tonight, not in this place, not at -96 degrees where nothing was supposed to change, but somehow something already had. The world did not return when Emma opened her eyes again, it only narrowed, as if everything beyond a few feet had been erased, and the storm had decided to leave her inside a smaller, quieter ending, her body no longer trembling but drifting in a strange stillness that felt almost gentle, almost kind, and that was what made it dangerous, because somewhere inside her fading awareness she understood that this calm was not safety, it was the last step before disappearing, and yet something else was there now, something that did not belong to the cold, a presence that held its ground against the wind instead of being shaped by it, and slowly through the blur of snow and breath she began to see it, not clearly, never fully, but enough to feel its size, enough to sense the weight of it standing just beyond her reach, watching, not circling, not closing in, just watching in a way that did not match the rules of this place, because nothing here waited, nothing hesitated, and yet this did, and the seconds stretched into something longer, something uncertain, until the silence between them became heavier than the storm itself, and then it moved, not toward her in hunger, not with urgency, but with a slow, deliberate step that pressed into the snow as if each movement carried meaning, and Emma should have felt fear, she should have pulled away, tried to crawl, tried to hide, but her body refused, not out of bravery but because there was nothing left to give, and so she stayed where she was, caught between the instinct to survive and the quiet acceptance that survival might already be over, and the shape came closer, large enough now that even through the storm it could not be mistaken for anything else, a tiger, its outline cutting through the white like something drawn from another world, something that did not belong to her story and yet had entered it anyway, and everything inside that moment said this was the end, that this was how it would happen, not with noise or struggle but with a quiet closing of distance, and yet when it stopped just a few feet away, it did not become what it was supposed to be, it did not reach, did not strike, did not claim what the cold had nearly taken, instead it lowered its head slightly, its breath visible in the frozen air, steady, controlled, alive in a way Emma could barely remember, and for a moment neither of them moved, as if the storm itself had paused to see what choice would be made, because this was not instinct anymore, not something written into bone or blood, this was something else, something that required a decision, and the longer it stood there the more impossible the decision became, because the world around them demanded one outcome and yet it had not happened, and Emma, drifting between awareness and absence, felt a flicker of something she had almost lost. Completely, not hope, not yet, but confusion, a question forming where there should have been none. Why was she still here? Why had the story not ended? And then slowly, almost carefully, the tiger took another step closer and something shifted in the air, not colder, not warmer, but different, as if the storm no longer held complete control, and though Emma could not understand it, could not name it, she felt it in the smallest way, a presence that did not push her further into the snow but held the space around her still, and in that fragile, impossible pause, the moment stretched again, waiting, because whatever came next would not follow the rules of this place, and somewhere deep within the storm, something had already begun to change, though Emma did not yet know if that change would save her or become the final mystery she would never get to understand. The distance between them disappeared without a sound, not because the storm had weakened but because something else had taken its place, something quieter and far more impossible, and when the tiger finally closed the last few feet it did not claim her, it did not become the ending she had expected. Instead it circled once, slowly, its massive form carving a boundary in the snow as if drawing a line the storm itself could not cross, and Emma felt it before she understood it, the wind that had been pressing against her suddenly shifting, breaking, diverted by the body that now stood between her and the endless white, and for the first time since she had fallen she felt something different from the cold, not warmth exactly, but the absence of that constant, crushing force that had been pushing her deeper into the ground, and it was enough, just enough to pull her mind back from the edge where everything had been fading, and she opened her eyes wider now, forcing them to focus, forcing herself to see what should not be there, the shape, the movement, the breath rising in slow steady clouds, and the realization came not as fear but as something far stranger, something her mind could not fully accept, because this was not how the world worked, this was not how stories ended, and yet the tiger lowered itself beside her. Not touching at first, not forcing contact, just existing close enough that the space between them began to change, and when the wind surged again it did not reach her the same way, it struck against the tiger and broke apart, spilling around them instead of through them, and Emma, without thinking, shifted slightly, her frozen body moving closer, drawn by something she did not understand but could not resist, and when her shoulder finally brushed against the thick fur it felt unreal, not soft, not comforting, just present in a way that anchored her to something living, something stronger than the storm, and the tiger did not pull away, it did not react as it should have, instead it adjusted. Just slightly, as if making room for her, as if accepting the weight of a fragile life that should have meant nothing to it, and the seconds stretched again into something longer, something that no longer felt like an ending but like a pause before something else, something neither of them had chosen but were now part of, and Emma's breathing steadied, not fully, not safely, but enough to keep going, enough to remind her body that it had not lost yet, and the cold, though still there, no longer felt absolute, no longer felt like the only force in the world, because now there was something standing against it, something that should not have been on her side but somehow was, and the question returned, stronger this time, louder even than the wind, why had it not left her, why had it not finished what the storm had started? And there was no answer, only the steady presence beside her and the growing sense that whatever this moment was, it could not last, because the storm was not done. The cold was not done, and survival, if it was still possible, would demand something more than stillness, and as if the world itself refused to allow this fragile peace to continue, the wind rose again, sharper, louder, carrying with it a deeper rumble from somewhere unseen, a shifting beneath the snow, a warning that the ground itself might not hold, and the tiger reacted before Emma could understand, its body tensing, its head lifting toward the white horizon as if it could see through the storm to something approaching, something worse, and in that instant the fragile shelter it had created felt temporary, fragile, already beginning to break, because whatever had brought them together in this impossible moment was about to be tested by something neither of them could avoid, and Emma, still pressed against the only warmth she had left, realized that surviving this would not be about the storm anymore, but about what the tiger would choose to do next. The warning did not come as a sound she could understand, not as words or even a clear signal, but as a shift in everything around them, the kind of change the body notices before the mind can catch up, and Emma felt it in the way. The tiger suddenly stilled, not relaxed, not calm, but focused, its entire presence turning toward something beyond the storm as if the world had just revealed a deeper danger hidden beneath the endless white, and the fragile shelter it had created no longer felt enough, because whatever was coming was not just wind or cold, it was something that could break even this impossible protection, and the tiger rose without hesitation, its body no longer shielding but preparing, and for a brief second, Emma felt the loss of that barrier immediately as the wind pressed back in, sharper now, more determined, reminding her how thin the line between survival and surrender truly was, and yet the tiger did not move away from her, it moved with intention, stepping forward and then pausing, looking back, not with human understanding but with something close enough to create meaning, a silent command that did not need words, and Emma, barely able to think, barely able to feel her own hands, understood in the simplest way possible that staying where she was would end everything, and so she tried to move, not because she believed she could make it, but because something in that presence beside her had made the impossible feel just slightly less final, and her body resisted at first, slow and unresponsive, but the moment she shifted her weight the tiger adjusted again, circling back, lowering itself just enough to block the wind for one more second, one more fragile chance, and she used it. Pushing herself up, her legs unsteady, her vision narrowing again as the cold tried to reclaim what it had almost taken, and when she took her first step it did not feel like progress, it felt like falling forward into something unknown, and the tiger moved ahead of her, not too far, just enough to lead, its shape barely visible through the thickening storm, and each time she hesitated, each time her body threatened to collapse again, it slowed, waited, never leaving, never disappearing into the white, and the world around them began to change in ways Emma could not fully see but could feel, the ground beneath the snow less certain, the wind carrying a deeper vibration, a low distant shift that suggested the storm was no longer the only danger, and somewhere ahead the snow began to move differently, not falling, not drifting, but shifting in larger, heavier patterns, as if the land itself was becoming unstable, and the tiger stopped again, its head lifting, its body tense in a way that carried urgency without panic, and Emma could not understand what it saw but she felt the weight of that pause, the sense that whatever choice came next would matter more than anything before it, and for a moment everything seemed to hold still, the storm, the wind, even her breath, as if the world was waiting for something to break, and then the ground beneath her foot gave slightly, just enough to send a crack of fear through her exhausted mind, and she froze, her body locking in place, unable to move forward, unable to go back, caught in the exact moment where survival demands action but the body refuses to respond, and the tiger turned again, stepping closer, its presence filling the space around her not with comfort but with insistence, a silent force pushing against her hesitation, and somehow, through fear, through exhaustion, through the overwhelming weight of everything around her, she moved again, one step, then another, following something she did not understand toward something she could not see, while behind them the snow shifted once more, deeper this time, louder in a way that did not need sound to be felt, and whatever had been approaching was no longer distant. It was here, closing in, turning the fragile path ahead into the only possible way forward, because stopping was no longer an option, and Emma realized with a clarity that cut through the storm that the tiger was not just protecting her anymore, it was choosing where she would either survive or disappear, and she had no choice left but to trust it. The path ahead did not become clearer, it only became narrower, as if the world itself was closing in around them, forcing every step to matter in a way Emma had never known before, and the tiger did not slow now. It moved with a quiet urgency that cut through the storm, its body low, its steps precise, choosing a direction that seemed invisible to anything except instinct, and Emma followed because there was nothing else left to follow, her legs barely holding her, her vision fading at the edges, each breath shallow and uneven as the cold pressed deeper into her chest. But something had changed inside her, something small but undeniable, because she was no longer walking alone, and that made every impossible step feel just slightly less final, and yet the world refused to ease, the wind rising again with a sharper edge, carrying with it a deeper tremor beneath the snow, a shifting that no longer felt distant but immediate, as if the ground itself was preparing to give way, and Emma felt it through her feet, a subtle instability that turned each step into a question with no safe answer. And the tiger sensed it too, its movements tightening, its path adjusting, leading her across a stretch of snow that looked no different from anywhere else but felt dangerously thin beneath them. And when Emma hesitated, when her body froze under the weight of exhaustion and fear, the tiger turned back again, closer this time, its presence filling the space with something stronger than the storm, not comfort but insistence, a silent refusal to let her stop, and she moved again. Not because she believed she could survive but because stopping now felt like something worse than dying. It felt like giving up the only chance she had been given without understanding why, and so she followed, step after step, until the ground shifted. More noticeably, a soft collapse beneath her boot that sent a ripple of panic through her already fragile awareness, and she stumbled, her body dropping forward as the snow beneath her gave slightly, not enough to swallow her but enough to remind her how close everything was to breaking, and in that instant the tiger reacted, not with fear but with precision, moving back toward her, positioning itself between her and the unstable ground as if it could somehow control what lay beneath the surface, and Emma stayed still, her breath catching, her body locked in place as the storm howled louder around them, and then, slowly, carefully, the tiger stepped forward again, testing the ground, choosing a path that curved slightly to the left, away from whatever unseen danger lay beneath the snow, and Emma followed, her movement slower now, more deliberate, each step guided not by sight but by trust she did not understand, and the world around them seemed to tighten further, the visibility dropping, the wind carrying fragments of snow that stung against her face, reducing everything to a blur of white and shadow, and still the tiger moved, unwavering, as if it could see through all of it, as if it knew exactly where they needed to go even though Emma could barely see more than a few feet ahead. And then something changed again, subtle at first, a difference in the way the wind moved, the way the snow settled, a break in the endless sameness that had surrounded them for so long, and Emma felt it before she saw it, a slight easing in the pressure, a shift in the air that suggested something ahead was different, something that might offer a moment of relief. And the tiger slowed, not stopping but adjusting, its movements more cautious now, as if whatever lay ahead was not entirely safe but still better than what they had left behind, and Emma forced herself to keep going, her body trembling, her strength nearly gone, but her focus locked on that moving shape in front of her, the only constant in a world that had taken everything else away, and as they moved forward the ground beneath her feet began to feel more solid, the subtle instability fading just enough to allow each step to land without that immediate fear of collapse, and for a moment, a fragile, dangerous moment, it felt like they might have found something better, something closer to survival, but the storm did not quiet, it did not loosen its grip, and deep within its endless roar there was still that underlying tension, that sense that whatever had followed them, whatever had begun to shift the world beneath their feet, had not disappeared. It had only changed direction, and Emma, barely able to think, but still aware enough to feel it, realized that reaching this place did not mean they were safe, it only meant they had stepped into the next part of something far more uncertain, and the tiger, still leading, did not slow as if to rest, it continued forward, as if it knew that stopping now would bring everything back, and Emma followed, because she had no other choice, and because somewhere inside her, against all logic, she had begun to believe that wherever this creature was taking her, it mattered more than anything she could see. The difference in the ground should have meant safety. It should have meant they had crossed whatever invisible boundary had been waiting to swallow them, but the storm did not loosen its hold and the air did not warm, and that was how Emma knew this was not an ending. It was only a pause inside something far larger, and the tiger seemed to understand that long before she did, because it did not stop, it did not rest, it kept moving forward with the same quiet certainty as if the path ahead had already been chosen, and Emma followed, her steps slower now, heavier, each one pulling more from her than the last, her body reaching a point where movement no longer felt like effort but like resistance against something trying to pull her back down, and still she moved because stopping now felt impossible in a different way, not because of fear but because of the fragile momentum that had been built. Something that once broken might never return, and the world around them began to shift again, not violently, not suddenly, but subtly. The wind no longer striking from all directions but flowing more consistently from one side, the snow drifting in longer lines instead of chaotic bursts, and the visibility, though still limited, began to open just slightly, enough for Emma to see shapes forming beyond the immediate white, darker outlines that hinted at something more solid, something that could break the endless exposure, and the tiger angled toward it without hesitation, its path curving with purpose, and for the first time since she had been lost, Emma felt something close to direction, something that suggested this movement was leading somewhere real, somewhere that might hold more than just survival. And as they moved closer the shapes became clearer, a cluster of low trees bent under the weight of ice, their branches thick enough to catch some of the wind, to create a narrow pocket where the storm could not fully reach, and when the tiger stepped into that space the difference was immediate, not warm, not safe, but less hostile, the air quieter, the wind softened just enough to allow breath to come a little easier, and Emma stumbled in after it, her body nearly giving out as the sudden change made her aware of just how close she had been to collapsing completely, and for a moment she leaned against one of the frozen trunks, her eyes closing, her breathing uneven but present, and the world did not feel like it was ending anymore, it felt like it was holding, just barely, and the tiger remained close, not circling now, not leading, but staying within that small space as if guarding it, as if acknowledging that this place, however temporary, mattered, and Emma could feel it, the difference between being exposed and being sheltered, even if that shelter was fragile and incomplete, and her thoughts began to return in fragments. Slow and disjointed, but enough to recognize that she was still here, that something had changed, that the impossible had already happened more than once, and yet the tiger did not relax, it did not settle into stillness the way she wanted to, its attention remained fixed outward, beyond the small barrier of trees, listening to something she could not hear, sensing something she could not see, and that tension began to spread into her again. A reminder that this moment was not safety, it was only a delay, and the storm beyond the trees shifted again, deeper now, heavier, as if gathering strength rather than losing it, and the wind carried a new sound, low and distant, not sharp like before but rolling, continuous, something that suggested movement on a scale far larger than anything she had faced so far. And Emma felt it through the ground as much as through the air, a subtle vibration that made the snow beneath her boots feel less certain again. And the tiger reacted immediately. Its body rising, its focus sharpening, no hesitation this time, no pause to decide, and it stepped out from the small shelter, looking back only once, that same silent command, that same unspoken urgency. And Emma understood with a clarity that cut through her exhaustion that staying here would not save her, that whatever was coming would reach this place just as easily as the last one, and the brief moment of relief shattered, replaced by the same relentless need to move, to follow, to trust something that should not be trusted but had become the only thing standing between her and the end, and as she pushed herself away from the tree and stepped back into the storm, she realized that the tiger had not led her to safety, it had only given her just enough strength to face what was coming next, and whatever that was, it was already on its way. The storm did not wait for them to be ready, it surged the moment Emma stepped back into it, stronger than before, heavier, as if the world had decided that whatever chance she had been given was already too much, and the tiger moved immediately, faster now, no longer just guiding but pushing forward with a force that felt urgent, almost desperate. Its body cutting through the snow with a purpose that left no room for hesitation, and Emma tried to keep up, her legs trembling, her breath breaking apart in the cold air, every step pulling her closer to the edge of what her body could endure, and yet she followed because stopping now would mean losing everything that had carried her this far, and the wind roared around them, louder than anything she had heard before, not just a storm now but something deeper, something rolling beneath the surface of the world, and the ground began to shift again, more violently this time, not just soft or unstable but moving in waves beneath the snow, and Emma felt it through her boots, a deep unsettling motion that made balance impossible, and she stumbled, her body dropping to one knee as the snow beneath her slid slightly, and panic surged through her for the first time in what felt like forever, not the quiet acceptance of before but something sharp, something immediate, because this was different. This was not the slow fading of the cold, this was something that could take her all at once, and the tiger turned back instantly, closing the distance between them in seconds, its presence filling the space again, not just a guide now but a barrier, placing itself between her and the shifting ground as if it could hold the world steady by standing there, and Emma tried to stand, her body resisting, her strength nearly gone, and for a moment it felt like she could not move anymore, like this was where everything would end after all. But the tiger did not leave, it did not step forward without her, it stayed, its breath steady, its body firm against the storm, and something in that stillness reached her, something stronger than the fear, stronger than the exhaustion, and she pushed herself up again, her legs shaking, her vision narrowing, but she stood, and the moment she did the tiger moved, not away but alongside her now, closer than before, its body brushing against hers just enough to keep her upright, just enough to guide her balance as the ground continued to shift beneath them, and they moved together through the storm. Not separate anymore but connected in a way that made no sense, each step a fragile coordination between something that should have been enemies, and the world around them grew louder, the deep rumble beneath the snow rising, spreading, until it felt like the land itself was breaking apart somewhere ahead, and the tiger changed direction suddenly, angling toward a darker shape barely visible through the white, something solid, something elevated, and Emma followed without question, because there was no time left for doubt, and as they moved closer the shape became clearer, a rocky rise pushing through the snow, not large, not safe, but higher than the shifting ground around it, and the tiger surged forward, reaching it first, then turning back again, that same silent command, that same insistence, and Emma forced herself forward, every step a struggle, every breath a fight against the cold that refused to loosen its grip, and when she finally reached the base of the rise her strength gave out again, her body collapsing against the frozen surface, unable to climb, unable to move higher, and the storm closed in around them, the ground behind them shifting more violently now, the rumble growing louder, closer, and the tiger did not hesitate, it stepped down from the rise, returning to her once more, placing itself at her side as if the path forward could not exist without her, and in that moment Emma realized something that cut through everything else, something that made even the storm feel distant, that whatever this creature was, whatever had brought it to her, it was no longer just leading her to survive, it was refusing to leave her behind, no matter what came next. And the ground trembled again, stronger now, closer, and the only way up remained just out of reach, waiting for something that neither of them had yet done. The rise was close enough to touch but impossibly far to reach, and Emma could feel the last of her strength slipping away as the storm closed in tighter around them, the wind no longer just pushing but tearing at the space itself, carrying that deep rolling vibration that had followed them, now rising into something immediate, something that no longer felt like a warning but like an arrival, and the ground behind them shifted again, heavier this time, the snow folding and settling in slow waves that moved toward them with quiet, unstoppable force, and Emma tried to pull herself up against the rock but her hands could not hold, her fingers too numb to grip, her arms too weak to lift her weight, and she slid back slightly, her body giving into gravity and exhaustion all at once. And for a moment everything narrowed to that single realization that she could not climb, that the one place that might hold against what was coming was just beyond her reach, and the tiger stood above her on the edge of the rise, its body outlined against the white, its presence steady even as the world around them began to lose its shape, and it looked down at her, not with hesitation this time but with something more certain, something that had already decided what would happen next, and then it moved, not away, not forward, but down, stepping back off the rise and returning to her again, closing the distance it had just gained as if the height meant nothing without her beside it, and Emma felt it before she understood, the shift in its movement, the way it positioned itself next to her. Closer than ever before, its body lowering just enough to align with her, and for a second nothing happened, the storm roaring, the ground trembling, the moment stretching to the edge of breaking, and then the tiger pressed in, not forcefully, not with aggression, but with intention, its shoulder against her side, lifting slightly, creating a support where there had been none, and Emma reacted without thinking, her body leaning into it, her weight shifting onto something solid, something alive. And suddenly the impossible became movement, her feet finding just enough stability to push, her arms reaching again, not strong but guided, and the tiger held its position, steady against her, adjusting as she struggled, step by step, inch by inch, until her hands found the edge of the rock and held, barely, but enough, and the storm surged again, louder, closer, the ground behind them shifting more violently now, and Emma did not look back. She could not, because everything she had left was focused on pulling herself upward, on not letting go, on not falling back into the white that had nearly taken her, and the tiger remained beside her until the last possible second, until she was high enough to hold on without it, and then it stepped back, not retreating but repositioning, its body turning outward again, facing the storm, facing whatever had followed them all this way, and Emma dragged herself onto the rise, her body collapsing against the cold stone, her breath broken, her vision fading in and out, but she was higher now, above the shifting ground, above the immediate threat that had been closing in, and for a moment, just a moment, it felt like they had reached something real, something that might hold, but the storm did not ease, it did not give them that certainty, and Emma forced her eyes open again, looking through the snow toward the only constant she had left, and she saw it still there, still standing below, not climbing after her, not taking the same safety it had given her, but remaining where the danger still moved, where the ground still shifted, as if the choice it had made was not about survival anymore, but about something else entirely, something that placed her above itself, and the realization cut through her exhaustion with a clarity she could not ignore, that the tiger had not just helped her climb, it had given up its own position to do it, and now it stood alone against whatever was coming next, and Emma, barely able to move, barely able to think, understood that this moment was not the end of their journey, it was the point where everything would be decided, not by the storm, not by the cold, but by what the tiger chose to do. Next the rise held beneath her, cold and solid, but it did not feel like safety, it felt like distance, a fragile separation between her and the chaos still moving below, and Emma lay there barely breathing, her body trembling in slow, uneven waves as she forced her eyes to stay open, because closing them now felt too much like letting go, and through the storm she searched for the only thing that had brought her this far, and she found it still standing below, exactly where she had left it. Unmoving against the shifting white, its form steady even as the ground beneath it continued to ripple with that deep, rolling motion, and for a moment everything slowed, not the storm, not the wind, but something inside her, a realization forming in a place beyond fear, beyond exhaustion, because what she was seeing did not follow the rules of survival, it did not make sense in a world where everything fought to stay alive, and yet the tiger remained there, not climbing, not retreating, simply holding its ground as if that was where it was meant to be, and the rumble beneath the snow grew stronger, closer now, the movement spreading across the surface like a slow wave that did not need speed to be unstoppable, and Emma felt it through the rock beneath her, a vibration that traveled upward, reminding her that even this higher ground was not beyond reach of whatever was coming, and the storm seemed to lean into it, the wind shifting direction again, carrying the weight of that unseen force forward, and still the tiger did not move, its attention fixed outward, its body aligned with something she could not see, something deeper in the storm, and then it stepped forward, not away from danger, but toward it, one deliberate step that broke the stillness of the moment, and Emma's breath caught, not from fear but from something else, something that felt like understanding without explanation, because this was not instinct anymore, this was a choice, and the tiger moved again, further into the shifting snow, placing itself between the rise and the direction of the deep rolling force, as if its presence alone could slow it, as if standing there mattered in a way that defied logic, and the ground surged again, stronger this time, the snow folding and settling in a heavy motion that reached the base of the rise, pushing against it, testing its hold, and Emma pressed herself closer to the rock, her body reacting even as her mind struggled to follow, and through the blur of wind and white she saw the tiger brace, not resisting in the way she expected but anchoring itself, lowering slightly, its form becoming a fixed point in a world that refused to stay still, and for a moment that should not have existed, the movement of the snow seemed to break around it, not stopping, not disappearing, but shifting just enough to change direction, to lessen its force against the rise, and Emma felt it, the difference in the way the ground beneath her held, the way the pressure against the rock eased just enough to keep it from giving way, and her breath came in a sharp, fragile rhythm as the realization deepened, that whatever the tiger was doing, It was not about saving itself. It was about holding that line, about giving her a chance that could not exist without it, and the storm did not end, the cold did not lift, but something within that chaos had been altered, redirected, just enough to matter, and the moment stretched again, longer this time, as the wave of movement passed, as the rumble beneath the snow began to fade into something distant once more, and the world did not return to calm. But it shifted away from that immediate collapse that had been closing in. And Emma lifted her head slightly, her vision still blurred but focused enough to see the space where the tiger stood, and for a second she thought it might turn back, might return to the rise, might choose to share the fragile safety it had protected, but it did not move, it remained there, facing the storm, as if the role it had taken could not simply be undone, and Emma